Hello friends, you're on the Ruslan Belov channel. Today, June 19th, 2026, we're breaking down the situation at the front and the key events of the day. A quick reminder. YouTube heavily limits the reach of this kind of content, so if these daily briefings matter to you, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you don't miss new releases. Now let's get to it. The main events today are once again in Donbass. Two major cities, Konstantinovka and Lyman, are entering a critical phase, and the situation for the Ukrainian defense on these sectors is extremely difficult. We'll start here, because this is where the front line is shifting fastest. To the south, in the Konstantinovka area, Russian units again improved their positions along the leading edge over the past day. After wrapping up the fighting for Roskishne and Dova the advance is gradually developing northward from two directions toward Mykolaipilia. According to available data, roughly 2 to 3 kilometers remain to the settlement itself, and that distance is shrinking daily. Pressure is also being applied further west, gradually narrowing the supply corridor for the units holding the city. The character of the advance suggests the goal isn't a frontal assault, but a gradual envelopment from the south, under which the garrison is forced either to withdraw or risk ending up half-encircled in unfavorable positions. Inside Konstantinovka itself, fighting continues. Information from here arrives with some delay, but the picture is taking shape. In the Metalur micro-district, pockets of resistance by Ukrainian units remain, which Russian troops are clearing, while continuing to advance in the northern part of the city. According to incoming reports, they managed to enter the Krasny Chervone micro-district from the central market side. This area is mostly private housing, so the advance moves faster than in the southern part of the city, where Ukrainian forces previously had to be dislodged from apartment blocks and basements. You can't build a serious defensive node out of private homes. The Russian Defense Ministry, for its part, reports that over the week it took control of a significant number of households, and that AFU, Armed Forces of Ukraine, hold less than 10% of the city, withdrawing toward Oleksievo-Drushkivka. These figures come as a ministry statement and are not yet independently confirmed. Given the nature of the development, the city's fall in the near term looks likely. Further north, on the Sloviansk-Kramatorsk axis, the most notable developments are unfolding. The day before, there were reports of the conclusion of the long fighting, more than 3 months, for Oleksandrivka. Today the advance continued. According to incoming information, Russian units managed to cross the Siversky-Donets-Donbass Canal and gain a foothold in a neighboring settlement. It appears in the sources under two names, Yurkivka and Yuryivka. I'm leaving that discrepancy for your check. The raising of flags has been recorded on objective control footage in several parts of this settlement, in the northern, central and southern sections. There is also an advance in the wooded areas around Lipivka, most of which, per available data, is already under Russian control. In parallel, there is an effort to close the pocket between Oleksandrivka and that settlement. This is the second secured bridgehead on the western bank of the canal, opposite Kramatorsk. There were earlier reports of an advance near Tikhonivka. The logic of the maneuver is clear. From these bridgeheads, the movement will likely continue westward, toward Nikhanorivka, Orikuvatka, and Malinivka, and from Tikhonivka toward Vasyutinska. The overall objective is to split the Sloviansk-Konstantinovka agglomeration in two along the Kramatorsk line, after which the fighting for each sector would proceed separately. At the same time, the Russian army is closing the distance to Kramatorsk from the east and approaching Mykolaiivka from the south, the last serious defensive node on the road to Sloviansk. The most critical situation today is in Lyman. This is one of the largest cities still under Ukrainian control in this part of Donbass. The problem for the defense is that the city is roughly 90% private housing. There's almost nowhere to set up serious defensive nodes in apartment blocks, as there were in Konstantinovka. According to incoming reports, the city's cohesive defense has effectively collapsed. Ukrainian forces hold the western part, the area around Zelensky High and Miru streets, and it's from there that units are now withdrawing west toward the Siversky Donets. That particular micro-district is the one where no geolocations with Russian flags have yet been published, whereas in the central part and in part of the Pivdeny micro-district, such control is already confirmed by footage. From the north, from the direction of Lake Lyman, Russian units are pushing into the southern industrial zone. On the map, the risk of a new pocket is clearly emerging. If Ukrainian forces don't pull out of what's left of the center, they risk being encircled. Judging by the fact that they aren't clinging to the built-up area and are giving up block after block, the withdrawal is already underway. Onward towards Shurov, Maiske and Sidorov. Meanwhile, the Russian side is seeking to take control of the crossings along the Siversky-Donets to prevent units from being pulled from the eastern bank to the western one. If that succeeds, part of the garrison risks being left without a withdrawal corridor. And that's a very different scenario from an orderly pullback. Confirmation of full control over both Lyman and Konstantinovka is expected to be possible within the next few days, after which the fighting will, as anticipated, move on to the next line, the very core of the entire Donbass operation, now to the Zaporizhzhia and Dnipro axes, where there is also plenty of material today. The R-73 highway, Nikopol-Dnipropetrovsk region, is under fire control. Drones regularly work against logistics and fuel tankers along it. Nikopol itself is effectively being cut off from supply. According to Russian sources, it's from here that strikes are launched against the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant and nearby facilities. To hold the sector, the Ukrainian side needs uninterrupted resupply, and with the highway under fire control, every run becomes a risk, which over time affects the density of the defense. Further east, on the Zaporizhzhia-Dnipropetrovsk sector, the Ukrainian side is expanding mandatory evacuation zones. After the Mern area, evacuation has been announced around Chaplin as well, directly opposite the sectors where Russian units are advancing. The key logistics hub here is Vasilivka, through which both evacuation and the resupply of personnel flow. Since the start of June, it has been hit by regular strikes on large structures and hangars capable of housing personnel. This indirectly points to the Ukrainian side preparing a new defensive line on this sector. Separately, a statement from the Vostok East grouping. According to it, the Vovcha River between Pokrovska and Velika Mikhailivka is no longer a natural defensive barrier, which may indicate that one of the settlements, Velika Mikhailivka, Havrilivka or Pokrovska, has come under control. There is no confirmed geolocation on this yet, so I'm marking it as unverified. If the information is confirmed, it would mean a breakthrough on the Dnipropetrovsk axis, which could also explain the rushed evacuation around the perimeter of Vasilivka. Moving to the Kharkiv region, 2 points here. In the Kolodiazny area, Russian units managed to clear a wooded stretch south of the previously taken Novovasilivka and to enter the northern part of Petro-Ivanivka. South of Vovchansk, the advance runs along the Siversky-Donets. Troops have been spotted on the western outskirts of the village of Ukrainske. The picture looks as though two groupings are beginning a careful convergence, so as to eventually reach Veliki Burluk from two sides and cut off the northeastern part of the region. The Sever North grouping reports fighting for Losivka and Ukrainske and increasing pressure on Bilyi Kolodiaz. And if there's an advance here, the Ukrainian force in that area risks encirclement. Given this, the defense of the region's northeast may give way, with a withdrawal south toward the Pechenihi Reservoir onto the Pechenihi Veliki Burluk line and further toward Kupiansk and the Kupiansk agglomeration. The intensity of the fighting here is high, and the pressure is only mounting. In essence, several potential encirclement points are forming on this axis, and holding Bilyi Kolodiaz without a secure rear is becoming increasingly costly for the Ukrainian side. In the Sumy region, no significant changes along the line of contact were noted over the past day. Now for a separate item, and arguably the most concerning of the day in terms of escalation. On June 19th, at a joint press conference in Kiev with the president of Honduras, Zelensky issued a direct ultimatum to Minsk. The matter concerned equipment on Belarusian territory, relay stations mounted on towers along two regions bordering Ukraine, which, according to the Ukrainian side, are used to adjust fire on Ukrainian territory and population. Zelensky gave Lukashenko 1 week to dismantle this equipment, stating that otherwise Ukraine would remove it itself. This came as a reaction to Lukashenko's recent apology. The Ukrainian president noted that he isn't offended by words, but the question of the equipment remains. He also stated that, in his view, Moscow will continue pushing Minsk toward involvement in the conflict, and that Lukashenko supposedly understands Ukraine will respond. The Ukrainian side emphasizes that the entire border, more than 1,000 kilometers long, is under constant control, and it continues to build fortifications on the northern direction. Why this is worth dwelling on separately. If it comes to acting on the threat, that is, a strike on facilities directly on Belarusian territory, that would be a qualitatively new step, effectively extending hostilities onto the territory of a state that to this day officially insists it is not a party to the conflict. Minsk, for its part, has repeatedly stated that it does not intend to be drawn into the war and treats such statements as an attempt at provocation. So the potential for the conflict to widen here is genuinely high, and the development of this storyline over the coming week is worth watching especially closely. I'll note that the separate incident involving a bus on the Homel-Bryansk highway mentioned earlier stands as an unverified report with disputed attribution and requires separate verification. On the diplomatic front, Western partners one after another announced new aid packages. The Netherlands, €500 million. Belgium, additional F-16 fighter jets this year. The United Kingdom, about $996 million, with the delivery of around 150,000 drones of various modifications and missiles. Germany, new air defense systems. In other words, against the backdrop of the strikes on Moscow and the footage of burning fuel facilities, Western capitals concluded that this is an opportune moment to ramp up deliveries. Based on this, there are assessments that the conflict will last at least until winter. Zelensky himself speaks of the need to wrap up the active phase before the cold sets in, since the coming winter is expected to be a hard one. Now to the strikes over the past day. The main event was the massive Ukrainian strike on Moscow on June 18th, using hundreds of drones. The primary target, according to media reports, was the Moscow oil refinery, which apparently sustained substantial damage. By evening, the city's mayor reported the situation had been stabilized. Meanwhile, footage of heavy smoke over the city was published. Despite reports that appeared about strategic aviation being put in the air and a response being prepared, no immediate massive strike followed. The decision has apparently been postponed, possibly to the near term. On the night of June 19th, the Russian side struck logistics and infrastructure. According to the Ukrainian Defense Ministry, around 90 drones were used. The targets were truck and tractor-trailer parking areas, fuel tankers, energy facilities, and the railway. In the Odessa region, at the intersection of the M15 and H33 highways near Monashi, fuel tankers were damaged and then, per objective control footage, destroyed. Fuel supply here is hampered, since the bridges near Mayaki and Zatoka are under Russian control. Strikes were also carried out against the port infrastructure of Odessa, effectiveness not yet confirmed, and against Ochakiv, where the destruction of several tractor-trailers was recorded, possibly ones used for strikes toward Crimea. On the Crimea direction, the Russian side is actively building pontoon crossings. After the crossings discussed earlier north of Armyansk, new imagery records construction near Henichesk as well. The aim is to preserve the ability to move reserves toward the Kinburn Spit and Oleshki in case the main bridges are lost, since their loss could leave the southwest of the Kherson region cut off from supply. On the Zaporizhzhia direction, there are reports of yet another fuel station destroyed in the Senikny area. Many such strikes on fuel stations have accumulated along the front to a depth of 100 to 150 kilometers. If this dynamic continues, the fuel infrastructure east of the Dnipro will come under serious pressure, and that directly hits the mobility of Ukrainian units. Without fuel, neither logistics nor maneuvering reserves can function. Strikes were also noted on Pavlohrad, against temporary deployment points or depots. In the Kharkiv region, in the northwestern part of the city, a depot was destroyed, presumably holding weaponry, through which, it's believed, the grouping in the Kozacha-Lopan and Zolochiv area was supplied. Near Zolochiv, an electrical substation was destroyed, and the sector is apparently de-energized, while Kozacha-Lopan is hit by regular aerial bomb strikes. In the Sumy region, footage was published of a strike on the Nova Poshta Logistics Center, with fires that followed. Let's sum up. After the strike on the capital, the Russian side took a pause. while the pace of the advance on the ground is not slowing but increasing, and the accumulated resources, by some assessments, could be brought to bear for a retaliatory strike in the coming days. And the main storyline of the week is the Belarus ultimatum. If it is acted upon, the risk of the conflict widening rises to a qualitatively new level. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel, leave your likes, and all the best to you.